Like I
Mhm.
said, we live in a Western culture where you can walk into an abortion clinic tomorrow and you can get an abortion. What makes it a bad idea?
Fundamental moral truth that we all agree with. Then I would throw it back to you. If you know the human embryo or fetus is not a human being, you'd have to know what a human being is prior
What does it mean to be a good man?
to take your gifts of masculinity and to use them for the good of others.
Okay, Trent Horn, welcome to the Rattlesnake podcast. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I first came across you a few months ago when you went on the Whatever podcast. I thought you did a fantastic job debating destiny, and you guys really got into the weeds of things. And one of the things that I really admired about you is the way that you handled that conversation, because these days it's such a hot issue, the whole pro-choice, pro-life. And in my
Sure.
personal life, being somebody who's pro-life myself, it's something that I try and avoid at all costs having this conversation because people
Yeah.
get so ridiculously emotional about it. And I guess you can kind of see why. Um, so today I wanted to have a little bit of a discussion about the morality of things, and I wanted to play devil's advocate a little bit and
Sure.
challenge you and just see how you sort of handle these objections, because it's very difficult to handle objections these days. Like I said, when everything's
Yeah.
so emotional. So first of all, if you don't mind giving us a little bit of your story and how you came to be where you are today in terms of your apologetics.
Sure. So I grew up in a relatively non religious family. I met Catholic friends when I was in high school. And through them, I became Christian and then later came into the Catholic Church when I was about 17. After that, so I did apologetics really to convince myself of things when I was in high school. Well, apologetics in the sense of looking at the evidences, and the evidence I found to be very convincing in favor of not just for Christianity, but for Catholicism as a whole, and for other moral issues like pro-life and things like that. Afterwards, I went to college, I went to grad school, master's theology, and then did some pro-life mission work with a group called Justice for All. I would travel to college campuses and I would talk to college students about this issue. So I got a lot of practice having these conversations that can get a little emotional, and you learn how to navigate that. Then in 2012, I was brought on to Catholic Answers to be a staff apologist there. And I've been working there for over 10 years. I've written about a dozen books, and I just want to help people, navigate these issues.
So, how did you find yourself in the internet space, and particularly with these debates about pro life and pro choice?
Well, I think people, there's this need to want to defend what's true. And,
Mm,
I saw other people doing debates. There's people that I've looked up to, like the Protestant philosopher William Lane Craig, for
yeah.
example. He was really instrumental in my conversion to Christianity. And so I looked up to people who had done this, and I started to do this just kind of on a low key level, just on college campuses. I would dialogue, I would debate with people. I did a few informal debates on university campuses for different Catholic apologetic groups. And people said, "Oh, you've got a good handle on this when you do this. I really like when you debate people." And it's a passion that I realized I really enjoyed doing
Mm.
as well. I find it, just fascinating. It's kind of funny. About a year and a half ago, I started getting involved with martial arts, in particular with Jiu-Jitsu. And I'm terrible at it, by the way. So anyone watching who wants to roll with me, I'm basically one level up from a training dummy, but I'm learning bit by bit.
Awesome.
Uh, and there's a lot of similarities there. What I like about it is you have to use your mind. It's not just brute strength. It's about using your mind. It's like playing chess with your body. And when I was a little kid, I liked playing chess as well. So I like in debates analyzing the argument, seeing where it's going, and anticipating where it's going
Mm.
to head off objections. And I want people to see that Christianity, Catholicism, the pro life worldview, that it can stand up to tough objections. It's one thing to give a talk to people who agree with you. That's easy. It's another thing to sit down with someone who's smart and disagrees with you. And then you'll see, okay, does the worldview, can it stand on its own two legs or not?
Yep.
And so I wanted to put myself out there to show, not for me, not to get attention from myself, but to show, yes, this truth can stand on its own two legs. There's good evidence for it, and there's good answers to the objections against it. And so I've sought out a wide variety of debates and debate partners, and it's definitely something that I've really enjoyed doing over the past few years.
Hmm. And it's funny you should say that, because I'm actually in Thailand at the moment training Muay Thai, and I've been doing
Muay
martial arts
Thai.
for years. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
I was doing, so I haven't done boxing in about 6 months because I partially tore my ACL, so I'm doing
mm,
strength training, and I can get back now. I'm at the point where I can do a jiu-jitsu ground game, and it's fun, and I can do that. I get more nervous in standing jiu-jitsu or boxing because because you know how it is, you're putting a lot of pressure on your knees, and
hmm
you want to be but I want to get back into that once my knee gets a little bit better. But I've always wanted to go to Thailand, and like, do they have you like kick the trees to like get your shins hard and like
Nah,
all
not
that
at the
good?
moment. But I mean, I'm at a
Okay,
camp called Lamai Muay Thai camp, and
that's cool.
these guys are about the life, man. And the problem is that I speak and write and research for a living, and I can't really afford to be getting as many head knocks. So
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
got to taper off a little bit, but I still do the training and everything.
that's
Um,
cool.
but probably if you've done your knee, I'd say make sure that that's nice and healed before you start letting people kick you in the legs.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so you're saying that it's very similar how and what I like about boxing's a little bit like playing rock paper scissors with someone, but
Mm,
with your fists in your head, like to notice patterns and to notice what someone is doing. And so it's
definitely.
similar when you engage someone in debates, because people might say, oh, well, like if I engage someone on the radio on abortion, how do you have how do you have conversations and make them go well? How does it not get
Mm,
emotional? How does it not get out of hand? Well, it's kind of like if you're really good at Muay Thai or you're really good at Jiu-Jitsu, like the people who are the best at that, when they're in a match, when someone starts doing something, they think that, oh, they're going to do this, this, and this. I've seen that 1,000 times. And so it's just easy for them to counter and reply. It's like your very first time boxing, your very first time with jujitsu, you're just like, you're all over the place. You're panicking, you're confused. And so you get emotional in
intrusive
those
thoughts and
settings.
all of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, but you think about the reason you get emotional, like the first time you do Muay Thai and you're up against somebody who's been doing it for years, they're just dancing around you, and
hmm
you're just wondering where do my fists go, where do I block, and you make a bunch of rookie mistakes at the beginning. And so it's similar when I have conversations about abortion. The only way you can get good about conversations on abortion or the existence of God or Christ is you have a lot of them with lots of different people, and you make mistakes as you go along, like, oh, that argument's not a really great one. And
Mm.
the more you talk, someone will say something, you say, oh yeah, I've heard that one before. And you have to treat the person with dignity though, and respect. You don't want to be like, oh, I've heard that a million times, so this is the first time for them, and you want to answer it, but because you've heard it before, you can answer it in a gentle way, and you're not going to get emotional about it.
Yeah, totally. And there's a few principles that I think are actually directly relatable. Like, I've got a strategy with these things. It's that if I ever get in these sort of heated conversations, or if I ever get in conversations at all with just people who I don't even know about cultural or political issues, my theory is the exact same as boxing, which is hit as hard as you get hit. If somebody comes
Yeah.
in, they're nice and light with you, and you can just bit of just tap sparring, then fine. But if they come in hands up throwing haymakers, then you have the right to throw a little check hook of your own. So, but
Well,
Trent,
and even there, and even
go
and
on.
even there, that's so funny though. Yeah, because let's say you have someone who's just overpowering more than they really need to. When you're really good, because when you're more of an amateur yourself, you'll be throwing haymakers back, and it gets really out of hand quickly. But if you're skilled and someone's being a bit aggressive, you can just have a little bit of fun with
Mm,
it to dodge and go back a little bit harder. And I think that's similar when you have conversations on, say, like abortion, and someone's being really aggressive and belligerent. I'm not going to be the same aggressive and belligerent back. I might be a little cheeky, and I'll throw something with a little more force. So I might be a little bit, I guess the word would be, I might be cheekier with them than I would with someone who's just honest and struggling and they're trying to understand the issue, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I can actually see the boxing match playing out in my head when you say that, because yeah. But just quickly before we get into it,
Yeah.
what's the best way that you learn? Because I've found that, like, I love debating, I love combat sports, I love these sorts of like chess matches. And I find
Yeah.
that when I listen to debates, I actually learn the best rather than reading or podcasts and lectures. How do you
Yeah.
learn the best?
Well, everybody has their different styles when it comes to learning. I remember once I was talking with Matt Fradd, who's the host of Pints with Aquinas. And so
Great channel.
we were talking, and he was talking about, Trent, I've come up with a mnemonic to remember the seven ecumenical councils, like all in a row. And it's this, and he gave me this system. And he asked me, how do you remember them? And I say, oh, well, I mean, I read about it, and I guess if I just close my eyes, I just kind of see the page of a book where I read about it. And he's like, I hate you.
Yeah.
And so, like, in some cases, I can just read things, and if I'm in the right zone, I just kind of absorb the information. If I'm just so I mean, I used to take notes. Sometimes I still will take notes and keep them in a folder based on different subject matter to go back and look at. But if I read things, it just kind of absorbs. Sometimes I can remember and see the page in my mind when I'm replying to other things. Listening is helpful. Sometimes if I recall a thought, I remember where I heard it. I mean, I remember the thought, like the lecture, and I remember where I was. Like, oh, I was riding my bike by the rec center, and that's where I heard that. So it comes back together. Debates are a helpful way for learning. What I like to do with debates is I'll listen to them, and I'll make a kind of flow chart of arguments. So I'll listen to the debate. I'll write down what the objection is. I'll write under it, what is the reply? What was the reply in the debate? And if there wasn't a sufficient reply, like, what reply would I give to that? So a lot of times when I study for debates, I'll make arguments and create counter arguments, and it'll be kind of an outline or a flow chart to see where the argument will go. And sometimes when I create an argument or I'm researching something, putting something forward, I'll think to my head, okay, how would a certain critic respond to it? What would be the objection? How would I reply to it? And so, another way that I learn, so that's one way I'll read. And a lot of times when I'll read a book, let's say I'll read just a introduction to a subject, I'll note what other books are cited often in that book. And then I will go and read that. It's funny, I have a bunch right here, actually. Let's say, for example, like I'm doing some work on the doctrine of justification in the Church Fathers. So I'm doing some work on that now. So I'm reading some books by Protestants. This is Schreiner's Faith Alone. And I notice that Schreiner will often cite the historian Nick Needham and Thomas Torrance's studies of the issue. So then I'll read Needham in this anthology, or I'll get Torrance's 1948 dissertation. And you have to be judicious about it. It's nice, you can usually get things on Kindle, or if it's an older work, you can often get it PDF out of print. So I'll read a book and I'll look, okay, who is being cited a lot in this? And that shows me the foundational text that I need to go through next to get a bigger picture of it.
It's interesting to see how the actual academic sort of process works, because I never go that deep myself, but I write scripts for my videos every day. And every time I make a point, I try and think of every way in which it could be attacked. So I can definitely appreciate that. So on the topic of pro-life and pro-choice, I'm going to come at it from the devil's advocate perspective, a little bit from the sort of new atheist, nihilistic perspective.
Sure.
And I'd just like to see how you handle these objections, and I'll pretend that I'm actually debating you, okay?
Sure.
Okay, so from the scientific perspective, there is no observable God that we could look at and say, there he is, he's speaking to us. Everything that you believe comes from a book and comes from your own field of study. So from my perspective as an atheist, I believe that through the process of evolution, people have gathered our own morality. So morality has been created through a series of tests and a series of trial and error, to the point where now everything is relative with in terms of cultures. And in our culture, just like the free market, you might say, the best ideas have risen to the top, And one of those ideas is that women have the right to abortions. So how would you counter that?
So I have a few thoughts on this to get into your worldview. So are you saying that an idea is moral if it is the most popular at the moment?
So what I would be saying, similar to the free market in terms
hmm
of capitalism, because, I think capitalism is good. You might agree. Do you think capitalism is good?
I do think that when you let people freely interact, they tend to have better economic interactions than when it's planned. But that doesn't mean it should always be free because people can exploit each other. But I see your point. Go on.
Sure. So a lot of the Western world at the moment, because of the scientific revolution, and I think
hmm
in particular with the new atheist movement as well, and I think this was popularized a lot in the early 2000s, 2010s with guys like Hitchens and Dawkins and Sam Harris, and they made atheism very not only did
hmm
they convert a lot of atheists, but they made it quite trendy to be an atheist.
Yeah.
So these ideas, it appears, in a lot of Western countries have kind of risen to the top now. And it looks as though
Mhm.
abortion is something that, I mean, well, in a lot of Western countries, the majority of people are now atheists. I think
Mhm.
in Australia, maybe they have an atheist majority. And then along with that worldview comes the pro-choice worldview. So what's your counter to the point that society has
Yeah.
chosen that this is a good idea?
Right. And I think what I would say here is I would question the assumption that because I would find common ground here. I would say, you know what, I agree with you that society makes moral progress. We try to be better. So we're trying to move towards being better. So I think that's something that we can agree on. But it doesn't follow that just because an idea has become popular, that therefore it is a good idea. For example, 100 years ago, people said with science, oh, now that we've learned science and we understand reproduction and we understand what goes into raising healthy people, we should make sure that people who have bad genes or bad lifestyles should not reproduce. And that was eugenics. That was as popular 100 years ago among academics as new atheism is today among academics and among others. It was the view of this is something that the intellectuals will defend. And there were things that were done. The US Supreme Court said that the state could sterilize someone against their will because they were deemed unfit to reproduce, for example. So I would say that just because something is popular, just because something has arisen after so-called scientific discourse, it doesn't follow that it's good. In
Okay.
order to determine whether it's good, we have to ask very basic questions like, how does it treat human beings? So we have to
Hmm.
start with some very basic moral truths that are true across all cultures, like that you ought to do good and avoid evil. You should not use human beings as objects. They should be treated as ends in and of themselves. So that would mean at the very most basic level, you ought not directly kill an innocent human being. And then we would show, okay, well, how do these uh, timeless moral truths, how would they apply to an issue like abortion or eugenics or something like that?
Right. Okay. So, in terms of it being a bad idea, like I
Mhm.
said, we live in a Western culture where you can walk into an abortion clinic tomorrow and you can get an abortion. So, a lot of people obviously think that is a good idea. So, in your worldview, what makes it a bad idea?
Well, I would say what makes it a bad idea would be that fundamental moral truth that we all agree with, that it is wrong to directly kill an innocent human being, that human beings have intrinsic value, they're valuable for their own sake, and all human beings are equal. Like I might ask you, do you think all human beings have equal basic rights and equal basic dignity? And if you say yes, I would say, okay, well, what's equal about us that guarantees we have this? Because we're different in size and cognitive ability. The only thing that is equal about all of us is that we have a human nature. But unborn human embryos and human fetuses also have human nature. They're members of the human species. So what's interesting here is that this claim, oh, well, this is what's popular now. You can go and you can get an abortion. I might ask you, is it wrong for a society to outlaw abortion? Like here in Texas, abortion is illegal, and the democratically elected politicians we have and people in society, it's still illegal. So in the U.S., you have places where it's legal and places where it's illegal. So if one says there's a bit of, if you say that it's just what society comes up with,
Mhm.
then you have no principled argument to say that it's wrong to outlaw abortion. But if you say, oh, it's wrong to outlaw abortion, even if society wants to do that, the majority, then you're appealing to timeless and transcendent moral truths beyond just what society comes up with. And so if you do appeal to those truths, I think one of those truths is definitely the wrongness of directly killing innocent human beings,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Definitely. I think the counter argument there would probably be that, well, you've sort of snuck in the presupposition that this is a human being. And,
Mhm.
in my worldview, I don't think this is a human being because this is not living in the world yet. This hasn't had a conscious experience yet. It's
Yeah,
still inside of the mother's womb. It relies on the mother for all of its nutrients. So how
sure.
can you say that this is actually a human being?
And what I would say in reply is, if you know the unborn embryo or fetus, human embryo, human fetus, is not a human being, then you must have some definition of what a human being is in order to disqualify this individual from counting as that. So if I said that this book is not food, I have to know what food is, or if
Yeah.
I say that this book is not a sphere, well, I know what a sphere is, a three-dimensional object where all of the points of the surface are equidistant from the center. This book is not that. So
Right.
if then I would throw it back to you. If you know the human embryo or fetus is not a human being, you'd have to know what a human being is prior in order to know that. So I would ask you for a definition, but I believe the definition will ultimately be ad hoc or inconsistent.
Well, the definition that I'd give you is that a human being is something that has conscious experiences in the world and something that has lived experience and doesn't rely on its mother, and something that has actually lived outside of the mother's womb.
What do you mean by a conscious experience?
Well, an experience, like I said, outside of the mother's womb, where they've existed in the world independently of the mother's nutrients.
Okay, so by that definition, something that is out in the world, not within its mother's body, that has a conscious experience.
Mhm.
So a rat would fit that definition.
Yes, because I believe that human beings and rats are equal in my worldview.
Oh, okay. So do you think then that if a firefighter there's a burning building and he could save a family of rats or one child, which should he save?
See, this is where I have to break character for just a moment, Trent, because this is an important part of the conversation, and I feel like this is the exact moment in the conversation when it really goes off the rails. And I'm sure you've had these encounters before where people just start saying, "Yeah, like there's no difference between human beings and rats. Maybe they should save the rat." And this is where it can get quite illogical.
Well, and
Um,
yeah, but I think though that people, and this is the more consistent view that though I do think most people, they don't believe that. So I might say, all right, if do you think people that eat meat should go to jail? Or people who make leather chairs.
mm,
If you really, because if you say there's no difference between a rat and a human being, then that means you have to treat them the same. So you either have to treat rats like human beings or you have to treat human beings like rats. And those are both alternatives, I think. And I would say if the person's really stubborn, I'd say, look, do you think your worldview makes sense that almost nobody holds this view? And so I might just, walk them down a bit more. But now we're getting even beyond abortion
Mm,
into which beings have rights and which do not, which beings are intrinsically valuable or not.
right. Okay, let me bring it back then.
All
So
right.
one of the common arguments in my worldview, I'm back now, is that it's the woman's right to choose. So
Okay.
if it was you, like, I don't even know why we're having this conversation right now, because we're just two white men who are a part of the patriarchy having this
Mhm.
conversation. Who- Why is it your position to tell a woman what to do with her body?
I might be, depending on who the person is, if they're being cheeky, I might say, "Oh, are you saying that only women can get abortions?"
That's a good one.
So
Well,
if I wanted to be real cheeky about it, I would I say, "Oh, yeah, how do you know that?" The other thing I might say, okay, so your argument, once again, when you're in discussions like this, I think it's helpful to just restate what the person said to understand them.
hmm,
You're saying abortion ought to be legal because women have the choice to have an abortion. To me, you haven't really made an argument. You're just saying abortion ought to be legal because it ought to be legal for women to have abortions. You're just basically, when by saying abortion should be legal because women have a choice, you're just restating the argument. You're not giving me a reason to think abortion ought to be legal, and you haven't answered the question that if abortion kills a human being with the same basic rights you and I have, well, nobody has the right to choose to kill a human being who has a right to life. So I would just say that this argument is just bluntly asserting something. It's not actually arguing for abortion.
right. Okay. Well, I guess the argument would be that because I'm a sovereign human being and it's my body and I've got the
Ah,
baby going inside my body, then who is anybody else, including the law, to tell me what I can do with this clump of cells that's inside my body right now?
well, I guess I would distinguish two things here. Are you saying this clump of cells is just a tumor or an organ that is a part of your body, like a kidney, or that it is a distinct biological human organism?
I would say that it is a clump of cells that are granted has the potentiality to one day be a human being if all goes smoothly.
So this argument that you're giving me is actually two arguments in one. It's the I have the
Mm,
right to control my body argument and the fetus is not a human being argument. What's interesting is you don't need both of them at the same time.
mm,
If the fetus is not a human being, you don't really need to stress I have the right to do what I want with my body. Everybody seems to agree with that you have a not maybe an unlimited right, but you do have a general right to do what you want with your body, to refuse medical care, to have wisdom teeth removed, have blood drawn, to take if you have a calcium deposit in your body, to have the right to have it taken out. So if an unborn human being is not a human being, then
mm.
yeah, abortion doesn't matter. But if it is a distinct biological human organism, and I would say that if you're saying it's a potential human being, well, a potential Y is an actual X. So if a man is a potential husband, he is an actual bachelor. So if you're a potential adult, you're an
Right.
actual child. So if someone says it's a potential human being, I would say, all right, what is it actually? And if you go through it, it's just, well, it's growing, it's got to be alive, it has human parents, it must be human, and it's a whole organism because it grows and develops if you give it nutrients in the right environment.
Yeah.
So it's a biologically human organism. There's really no way around that. So if you're saying, all right, well, then I just have the right to do what I want with my body, I would just challenge that to say that doesn't seem obvious to me that while people have a right to their bodies, there is a limit to what you can do with your body. And there's a wide variety of examples we can give to challenge that. If that's the case, you have the right to do whatever you want with your body. Should a woman have the right to take the anti-nausea drug thalidomide during pregnancy? Because if you do that, your child could be born without arms or legs. Most people would say you don't have a right to do that, to cause
Mm,
that harm to the fetus. Another one would be if you have the right to do what you want with your body, imagine that a fetus is delivered at 20 weeks and then is placed in a neonatal care unit and then is placed back in the mother's body at 21 weeks. You could not kill the child at 20 weeks in the neonatal care unit of the hospital. But if the child was placed back in his mother's body, well, she has the right to do whatever she wants with her body. But most people would find that outrageous, that you can't kill someone in one location, but you can kill them in another location. The argument also seems to depend on the idea that if I own a place, I have the right to treat people there however I want to. That doesn't seem correct to me. If a toddler wanders into my house, I don't have the right to kill that toddler because it's my house, even if all I'm doing is placing him outside in a snowstorm. I don't have the right to do that. One last example I'll give is more of a mundane example, but it's from a philosopher. I want to say Louis Poyman, I think, came up with it. Like, I have the right to do what I want in my body. Imagine you left your wallet on a park bench and Fat Fred sits his fat butt on your wallet. And you say, hey, I have a train to catch. I need my wallet. You're sitting on it. And he says, well, it's my body. I have the right to do whatever I want with it. You can't tell me what to do with my body. Most people would say, no, you have the right, including to enlist help from police or others to move Fat Fred to get your wallet back. That while you have a general right to control your body, this unlimited right to do whatever you want to whoever might be there, it seems to me that it's more controversial than the right to abortion. So that's the problem with these arguments, that if you're defending something, the reason you're using to defend an action should not be more controversial than the action itself. Otherwise, you don't have a very good argument.
Yeah, I mean, I'm intentionally not giving you the baby's a human being because it's just a checkmate that I've noticed every time you have these debates. If you give up the fact that it's a human being, the logical conclusion to that is as follows.
Now, some people will be cruel. They'll just say, yeah, I don't care. It's a human being. It's my body. I can do what I want. And there I will push back and say, so you're saying you have the right to treat a human being however you feel. What's civilized about that? Is that not barbaric? Or what's the definition? What do we call it when you treat one human being as property? Slavery. We just ask them to define it, and then you just have to make them kind of stare at the ugliness.
And that's a good point, making them stare at the ugliness, because this is another place where this conversation goes off the rails, I find, when people say, it's a baby, but my body, whatever, I'll just do what I want. And it's not an uncommon thing, but it's just like anything. You sort of, unless you're actually seeing what's happening, and unless it's in front of your eyes and you have to witness the process, you can be as flippant as you want about it. Next point I'll give you.
All right.
So obviously abortion is just healthcare. It's a safe way to do this procedure. And if there wasn't abortion, women are going to have these abortions anyway, but they'll take place in the back alleyways. And this is another way that we are actually oppressed in the patriarchy, because this is a way that men actually just want to control us. And these abortions are going to happen anyway. And it's much, much safer for the woman to just access this basic healthcare and to have an abortion.
Is it a sign of patriarchy to use strength and violence to get against weaker people to get what you want?
Yes.
So if the unborn is a human being, then it would seem like abortion is a patriarchal act of using violence against a being that's much weaker to get what you want. So that might be one point I would bring up. Is once again, notice I'm always going back to what are the unborn. So if someone says here where abortion is healthcare and legal abortion is just safe healthcare, I would say, well, safe for who? If abortion were as safe for the child as it is for the mother, I would have no problem with abortion. But that's not abortion, that's childbirth. It's not safe. So I might reframe the argument and say, okay, help me understand your position.
Sure.
Are you saying that we should make it legal for bigger people to kill smaller people so that it is safer for the bigger people? Is that your position?
What I'm saying is that the bigger people, in terms of the mother, have already lived a life. They might have family, they might have friends, they've got life experiences, and their life is worth more than this clump of cells that I'm not going to admit is a human being. So that's the argument at the end of the day, is that the mother might die from this illegal abortion if we make it illegal. So I think we should have this basic healthcare to ensure that this more important life, the mother, is able to survive.
Well, let's suppose, for example, a mother wants to kill her 10-year-old, and her 10-year-old might be able to fight back, and he might hurt her actually. And she's has more life experiences than that 10-year-old. So she's lived more of a life than the 10-year-old, and she doesn't want to get hurt trying to kill her 10-year-old. Should she be allowed to hire someone to kill the 10-year-old so that it's safer for her to do that?
No, because first of all, it's illegal to do that. And
Should
second
it?
of all,
Why is it illegal?
well, it's illegal because, like I said before, in the free market of ideas, we've come to the conclusion that that's something that's worthy of being punished by law. But go on.
You mean the killing of a human being ought to be punished by law?
I mean, the killing of a viable human being that's had life experiences outside of the womb.
Okay, so I think we're back to the main issue here, which is if the unborn has the same basic rights as a 10-year-old or a 1-year-old, then it ought to be illegal as well to kill him or her. The fact that they are not viable, what I would say is, why does that matter? That you're saying, well, an unborn child cannot survive outside of his mother's womb. Therefore, it should be legal to kill him or her. Well, why does that matter? A bedridden 98-year-old disabled woman can't survive without a nursing attendant or someone to help her. They're extremely dependent. But it doesn't follow that you have the right to kill him or her just because they're very dependent on someone. Where we always have to go back to that one question: what are the unborn? The fact that I would say that they are viable, they can survive precisely in the environment that is natural for him or her. So why would we? And to give and it's more of a science fiction-y example, but imagine that a Martian teleported me to Mars. I would die if he did that. And he might say, well, I haven't done anything wrong because that Earthling isn't viable. He can't survive on Mars, but I can survive in the place where I was doing just fine until you ripped me right out of there. So what you did was wrong. And the same thing can apply to abortion.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think that this is the point where it's important to, like you said, kind of hold the feet to the fire a little bit and keep coming back to that point of what is a human being, because
That's
oftentimes this is where the conversation can just stray and it can just literally go anywhere. But if you sort of accept the other person's presupposition that, okay, well, it's just a clump of cells, it's not a human being, then that's when the conversation degenerates a little bit, maybe.
Right. Yeah. You always, always, always go back to the one question: what are the unborn? Return there constantly in order to have a good conversation on the issue.
All right. I've got a few more scenarios for you.
Sure.
So, Trent Horn, you are a doctor in a war zone, somewhere that's plagued by war and violence.
All right.
And you're in your little tent. Okay. It's in the desert somewhere. You're in your tent and you're having patients come and see you. And then you have a 12-year-old girl who comes in and she has been, sexually assaulted. And she says to you that she wants to get rid of this baby. And she has to get rid of it because first of all, she doesn't want it because she doesn't want to carry that person's seed. And second of all, if she's found by the village elders, she'll be stoned to death. What do you say to the girl?
Well, there's two different things here. One, there is the principled moral argument, and two, there is what you would say to a person in a difficult situation like this. So, for example, if we were arguing about should it be legal for someone to jump off a bridge if they don't want to live anymore, we might say, well, no, it shouldn't, because many people in these situations, they're a valuable human being and they're mistaken about life. And most people would say, no, that shouldn't be legal. And the wrongness of suicide, the harm it causes to other people, we shouldn't do that. And we would make these moral arguments. but you might not recite all of those moral arguments if you were standing on a bridge and there's a guy there saying, I'm going to jump, I don't want to live anymore. There, you might give some arguments, but you're more going to give a pastoral approach to say, look, you're making a permanent, irreversible decision. You're going to do something that can't be undone. Anything you're dealing with now, it doesn't mean that there's no way out of that. And there's different, obviously, I'm not an expert in suicide prevention or talking to someone who's going to jump off a bridge, but you can see the difference between making the moral argument and making a pastoral exchange with someone to say, look, you find yourself in this difficult situation, but that doesn't mean that you're hopeless, to give that person hope. The situation you're describing, the moral principles are the same. You don't kill innocent human beings. Imagine if that, and I might even phrase it like this to the young girl for her to make the point. What if you had given birth to this child secretly and you brought the baby to me and you said, look, I can't have this baby. If people find out it's my baby, I'm going to be stoned to death. Can you please just painlessly kill my baby? I would say, look, this is a very awful situation that you're in. It's terrible, but an act of evil, we cannot justify answering one act of evil with another act of evil. So while this is an awful situation, we may not know exactly what we ought to do, but we know what we should not do. And we're not going to kill this baby in your arms, even if there's going to be difficult repercussions. I think what often happens in a situation like this, sometimes we are placed in a position in life where the choice is not between an easy good choice and an evil choice. Sometimes in life, we have to make a choice between doing something heroic and doing something evil. Sometimes we're forced. A lot of times with heroism, you could choose just good. You don't have to be a hero. You could just be a decent person. But let's say, you're in a concentration camp and people have escaped, and the commandant comes to you and he says, look, if you tell me who's planning, or people are planning to escape, if you tell me who's planning to escape, I will give you and your family food. Otherwise, you're very at risk of starving to death. So here's the choice. You can either be a hero and risk starvation and not give up your friends and just give a mental reservation. Like, I don't know about any escape plans going on this week, even though maybe it's next week or whatever it may be. We can talk about lying another time. Or so you could do the heroic thing, or you could do the evil thing and betray people, and give them up. Tell someone some information they have no right to know. And so this can happen in situations where, to say to this young girl, look, you have your choice here is to do something evil, to kill a child, born or unborn, or to do something heroic and be this child's mother. And if you do kill this child, you will always, for the rest of your life, be a mother who killed her own child. And I cannot help you do that. I cannot help. And I might say, I, as a doctor, I took an oath to do no harm. So we'll try to find something else to help you. But the doctor's role is to heal, not to kill. So that's a few ways I might approach a situation like that.
So following on with your logic there, being that the mother has killed her own child, is there any difference in the moral equivalence between somebody doing life in San Quentin for a murder and a mother who's had an abortion?
What do you mean? Is there a difference between the punishments or the person who is involved? Help me. I'm not sure I understand the
As
question.
in terms of in the eyes of God, let's just say, or in the eyes of a Christian, just in terms of purely the moral equivalence between taking somebody's life at gunpoint and doing life in San Quentin and a mother who's had an abortion.
What I would say is, every act of illicit homicide. So homicide is the killing of a human being. Not all homicide is wrong, because, for example, if someone is trying to kill you and the only way you can stop them is with lethal force, you have the right to do that. So you can kill in self-defense. If someone's breaking into your home, you could shoot them. Now, if someone broke into your home and they're running away and you shoot them in the back, that would be wrong. That would be unjustifiable homicide. And you could be held legally accountable for that. So what I would say is that all acts of all acts of murder, we can just put murder in there, of the deliberate killing of a human being, are equally wrong in the sense that the act is wrong. But moral acts are not just the act. We also have to look at intention and circumstance. So every act you have the act, the object of the act, I should say,
Mhm.
the intention behind it, and circumstances. If one of the, it's like three rivers flowing into a
Right.
spring. If one of them is poisoned, the spring will be poisoned. So you could have an act that is good, like let's say giving to the poor. But if your intention is, I am only doing this because I want to look good in the eyes of others, well, then it's wrong. That's why Jesus says, "You have your reward, the praise of men, but not the praise of God."
Yep.
If you're
The
doing
hypocrites.
something,
Yeah.
exactly. So, but you could be doing something that is feeding the poor. That is a good thing, but has a bad intention behind it. Or if you do something and there is a circumstance that would make it wrong, like I want to cheer up someone at the hospital, so I get them a box of chocolates. Well, if they're allergic to chocolate, that's actually the wrong thing to do. Now, here, notice what's happening though. If I don't know that, I've done something wrong, but I'm not morally culpable. I'm not
Right.
responsible. I didn't know that they had this allergy, even though the act itself was wrong because of a circumstance related to it. So I would say that when it comes to different homicides, we have to look at not just the act, we also have to look at the intention and just the various circumstances. And I think that where we live in a world, we live in a world, if someone puts a gun to someone's head, robs them, and just kills them and takes their stuff, everybody agrees. Everyone everywhere agrees it's evil to kill someone and take their stuff. So people who would do that really lack excuse. Especially if they're doing it not out of necessity, they're doing it for thrills. Basically, we would consider that really depraved. But there's many other cases of killing where we have different intentions and circumstances. Um, you have someone killing in the heat of the moment is considered not as bad as premeditated killing. It's still very bad, but not as bad. Uh, but let's say with abortion, very different from just the amoral robbery example. We live in an extremely divided world and country where many people think abortion is just fine. Many doctors think it's just fine. It's a hotly debated political issue. Killing someone during robbery is not. So you have people who may have been brought up their whole lives thinking the unborn are not human beings, and finding many other smart people who agree with them. Because society is so divided. So in that case, now I would say the culpability for women who choose abortion is far less. Now we may get to a point, let's say 100 years from now, where abortion is treated as wrong as many other acts of homicide. But I think the culpability is going to be different, and the punishments we give are going to be different. Much the same way that, let's say, a mother who kills her own child, her own baby. Many cases, though, the legal punishment for that is less than someone who just goes and kills a stranger, because infanticide, those who commit infanticide, they're not as much of a threat to society as a whole. They're more a threat to their own children. Much the same way that if you kill a police officer, you get a much harsher punishment than, let's say, killing another drug dealer in a gang fight or something like that.
Yep.
So just because punishments are different, it doesn't follow that some acts aren't wrong or something like that. We can say that abortion is wrong; it ought to be illegal, and the punishments are going to be different, reflecting the different levels of culpability of the actors involved.
Action, intent, the act, the intention, and the circumstance. I think that's
Well, I'd
my
say
next. Yep, go on.
the act is the object of the act, the intention, and the circumstance.
Right. Okay. And my next question, but which you've just answered, was going to be: is the abortionist? Is there a difference between them and the serial killer? But I think you just answered that. So
Yeah, because I would say a medical provider who is making money doing this versus someone who is in a position with an unintended pregnancy who feels coerced or pressured by various factors. I think someone who has studied medicine and sees that, what they are doing to this child. I think the culpability is going to be a lot. It's going to be greater, at least, than for the woman who chooses abortion.
And I heard Lila Rose reference the other day in a debate that there was there's basically a sign. I'm not one to sort of, shout scientific consensus from the rooftops, but basically there's a scientific consensus amongst biologists that's not only just a scientific consensus, but amongst left and right, that basically life begins at conception. Did you know what study that she's referring to? I'm sure you do.
Yes, this was part of I cited in my book, Persuasive Pro-Life. I wonder, I might be able to, and I think it was 96%. Let's see. So I have it here. I did a podcast on it. The name is not coming off to me right.
No,
Let's
that's
see.
okay. That's okay. But basically, there's a scientific. But this is the point that I'm trying to get at is that
it's Steve Jacobs.
Yep.
So Jacobs wrote an article in 2019 based on his study, and it's called "I Asked Thousands of Biologists When Life Begins. The Answer Wasn't Popular." And he surveyed over 5,000 biologists, and 96% of them affirmed that human life begins at fertilization. 85% of them were pro-choice. 63% were non-religious. So they were. So biologists agree that this is a human organism, at least.
Okay. Well, I'm going to leave my atheist sort of alter ego behind now. To be honest, I'm happy that's over, because that was difficult to argue from that perspective.
Sure.
So, but this is something that is it's a fact that, I mean, as far as we know what a fact is, this is a fact that life begins at conception. But even when Lila Rose said this to Dr. Phil, he was saying, no, that can't be a fact, and he's supposedly a doctor. But it's something that not many people know, and if you try and tell people that, then
I think many people will confuse. Yeah, they will confuse the fact that an unborn human embryo or human fetus is a human organism. The term human being can refer to a human organism, or it can refer to the philosophical concept of a person. And so a lot of people say, oh, it's a fact, it's a human being. Say, no, it's not a human being. People disagree about that. Yeah, they disagree about the philosophy. But that's why I use very specific language here. And I might say to Dr. Phil, is a human embryo or human fetus a individual member of the human species? Is a human embryo or a human fetus a human organism? And if he said no, I would say, then can you define what an embryo or a fetus is? And if you define them, it is a stage of development in the life of an organism. But you have to use very specific terms. That's why for the science, I like to say human organism rather than human being.
Right. Okay. So if somebody is making the argument of, no, actually, it's not a human being, it's just a fetus, it's just an embryo, and using any of the other sort of like Latin words, you could then take it a little bit further and say, well, is this fetus an individual member of the human family? Would that be an argument?
Or the human the human species. Is it an organism? And then really press them to define the term embryo and fetus, because you can't. Those terms are stages of development in the life of an organism. So if you say human embryo, that's the same thing as saying biological human organism from conception until the 7th week of life.
Right. Okay. So I'll round it off with this, because I want to get a few more quick questions in, if you don't mind.
Sure.
But just on this part of the conversation, it concerns me, it baffles me, it saddens me whenever I see, and I've seen this a few times over the last few years, when in Argentina and Mexico and countries like this, they legalize abortion, and then these massive parties in the middle of the street where these women are painting their faces and glitter everywhere, and it's like it's as if they've gained this massive freedom. And I think that there's something very sickening, and I don't want to be too harsh, but it's something quite sickening about seeing such a celebration.
Of course,
so morbid.
Of course.
Well, what do you think is happening there?
Well, I think what people are trying to do is they're trying to justify their depraved behavior. That for many people, if you're only tepid about it, you're going to be doubting yourself, and there's a lot of doubt that comes with the issue of abortion. Everybody agrees it's unpleasant, at least. So I think when people double down, and I think most people aren't like that. Like, that's the minority, the people who want to go out and just a lot of people want to keep their heads down and get on with their life. They don't want to raise trouble. So they don't want to raise trouble about abortion. They don't want to raise trouble about transgender. They keep their head down, do their jobs, and get on with life. The people you see in the streets are the activists. They're the people who have made this a part of their identity. And so they want to revel in that. And you're right to feel sickened by someone celebrating evil. So when that happens, I might, if I was there and people were doing this, I might hold a giant placard with a picture of abortion. And I would say, all right, is this what you are celebrating? Is this what you want to celebrate and dance in the streets about? Because if it's so good and it's worth celebrating, why not show pictures of it? Why not show pictures of what we are doing here?
Yeah.
So I know it's interesting. It's funny when these things come up. I still think of counter examples, right? I have a little critic in my head that always comes up with counter arguments to keep me on my toes. So someone might say, well, Trent, would it be okay to have a festival celebrating the end of world? And there were people celebrating the streets when World War II was done. Should we show pictures of Hiroshima? And I think, yeah, because I actually think how World War II ended was unjust. That we ended the war in VJ Day, at least. We ended victory in Japan by incinerating hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of innocent people.
Yeah,
Should we be celebrating? Should we be celebrating this? And I do think that even if you were to win, like that was back in the 40s, I think if we won a war today, no, I don't think it would be appropriate. Even if it was a just war, it's such a somber thing that the war is done. We ought not celebrate it. We should be. So I'm thinking it's so funny because I'm thinking somebody could, because it's just, World War II, I would say, was a just war, at least in stopping the Nazis, for example, from, committing Holocaust and things like that. But so it was just, so I could see someone saying, if you had the pictures of civilian casualties, World War II celebrations, that doesn't disprove World War II was wrong. The pictures of abortion wouldn't do the same thing with abortion. And I would say, look, abortion is not like a just war. The fetus can't even fight back against you. They're very different things. But I guess I would probably bite the bullet in an objection like this and say, no, I don't think we should have those celebrations because war is just such a somber reality. So sorry how my brain ping pongs around. I'll give an example. I'm like, oh, someone can make this objection. How would I reply?
I mean,
that's what you always have to do.
I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and go to the toilet, and I'm just like thinking about the war in the Middle East or something.
Sure.
I get what you mean. One thing I really like about watching the Council of Trent, watching your YouTube channel, is that you have this ability to be morally very consistent. And there's something so satisfying about watching it, somebody who actually has a consistent worldview. And I wonder if that for you is something that really strengthens your belief in God and your faith in the fact that you have a worldview that is morally consistent, and not only consistent in the sense that you can intellectualize things, that you can actually justify the way that you view the world.
I think it's absolutely crucial. When I debate with people on moral issues, when you debate about moral issues, you really have one of two options to show someone's moral position is wrong. You can take it, you're going to have one of two things will happen. Either their position will be consistent and it will lead to a hard truth. It will lead to, this is a difficult position for me to take, but like saying, look, I'm not going to do an abortion for a 12-year-old victim of rape who might be subject to honor killing because I believe it's wrong to kill innocent human beings. It's consistent, but many people, they'll go with their gut and say, yeah, it's fine in that case. I'm saying, no, I'm going to be consistent on this. I'd rather be consistent versus the alternative would be your moral system is just a collection of viewpoints of here's what makes me comfortable, here's what makes me uncomfortable. And the only thread running through them is just how I feel about them. That is an incredibly dangerous view to have, where it's morality is solely dependent on whether it makes you feel good or bad. Jeremiah 17:9 says that the heart is a wicked thing. Or is it 17:19? I think it's 17:9 says the heart is a wicked thing. Who can know it? So I think that you're either going to have consistency that will lead to hard positions, or total arbitrariness that might feel good, but your moral view is completely at the whim of your emotions.
Yeah, no, the appeal to emotion is something that you see a lot in this argument. So I put that in there for you to handle on purpose.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of one of the things that I really love talking about on this channel is the crisis that we're having with masculinity at the moment. And
Sure.
I've had people on the podcast who have made a pretty good case actually for not wanting to get married, especially not wanting to get married in the West, and what it means to be a man and what it means to be a man in the modern world, in the current dating scene with social media and all of these corrupting influences that we've got happening at the moment.
Yeah.
According to Trent Horn, what does it mean to be a good man?
To be a good man is to take your gifts of masculinity and to use them for the good of others. So there's two extremes, right? There's one extreme that says men and women aren't different at all. There's really no relevant differences between men and women, and that's not true. I mean, men are on average larger. They're more prone to taking risks. They tend to be physically stronger than women. They tend to have better spatial reasoning than women. And women are different. Women, for example, tend to be better at verbal reasoning and linguistics when you do cognitive exams, things like that. And they tend to be better at interpersonal dynamics and empathy and nurturing and things like that. So there are feminine gifts and there are masculine gifts. What it means to be a man is to use your masculine gifts, strength, reasoning, stratagem, whatever it may be, for the good of others rather than for the good of just yourself. That a bad man is someone who uses his masculine strengths to exploit, to oppress others just for his benefit. A good man is someone who uses it for the benefit of others. Whether he's a soldier, firefighter, a dad going to work, using his strength for the benefit of others.
Really strong answer, man. Really strong answer. And doesn't it just make the world go around though? That answer in a nutshell. Couldn't you just extrapolate that endlessly? And
Yeah.
it's what makes healthy societies.
And if you notice also for the crisis of masculinity for men today, if you are a man, and this is true for anybody, but especially for men, if you are spending all of your time trying to entertain yourself or blaming other people, and especially blaming groups of people for the problems in your life, you're going to be miserable. What makes someone authentic masculinity a real man is he doesn't, entertainment is fine, recreation and leisure is fine, but he's not trying to always entertain himself. He's investing in himself. So I would say that if you're a man and you feel, just kind of lost out there, focus on investing in yourself. Even if you're non-religious, you can just start with, look, going to the gym and exercising. You don't want to become a meathead or something like that, but being physically balanced, finding balance in the different areas of life. So physically, not being a meathead, but at least being in shape. You're not wheezing all the time. You're not eating out all the time. Eat a salad. They're actually good for you. They can be fun. Not pouring yourself into social media. I'm disconnected from almost all social media, and I've never been happier.
Yeah, you're a hard man to reach. I had to tweet at you.
I know, but my Twitter now, I don't really respond to people anymore, and I don't go on other stuff. But there's lots of things, video games. Once again, it's all about balance. I enjoy video games, but when you are spending hours upon hours just trying to, how can I entertain myself? How can I have fun? How can I go out with people? What's the next thing I'm going to do? Instead of investing in yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially, vocationally, that especially, I think some young men, they get this weird chip on their shoulder. They're like, oh, women out there, they're just awful, and they only want chads, and they're terrible. And there are women who are, picky or selfish. There are men who are picky and selfish. I would say, yeah, but what do you have to offer? What do you have to offer them for them to come knocking down your door? Have you invested in yourself so you have a stable career and you can support a family? Have you invested in yourself physically so that you have masculine strength and you have energy to play with kids and you can take care of a family? Have you invested in yourself intellectually and culturally so that you have interesting things to talk about and you can carry a conversation, and you have self-esteem in yourself apart from anyone else, so that you can just have fun with a girl you're getting to know, and you're not this needy, clingy person who's always afraid she's going to like bail or something like that. That you are both independent people who complement one another. So I would say that if investing in yourself, and ultimately God, going to God, he made you a man. He could have made you a woman. He didn't do that. He made you a man, and he could have not made you at all. He made you, and he made you a man for a very particular purpose. And so by drawing close to him, you'll be better at understanding that purpose.
Do you know what I get from that as well when I hear you say that, Trent? It rings true to me that there's just no shortcuts with this stuff. And you actually have to invest in yourself as a man, and you have to actually be able to, like you said, hold a good conversation and be in decent physical shape. And this takes a lot of hard work. And it really stinks to me when I see guys out there who are posturing and trying to be something that they're clearly not. And they've sort of heard someone say something on the internet, and they try and just be like that guy, without trying to actually invest in themselves and realize their potential.
I cannot stand it. I find the people who seem least manly to me are the people who are always bragging about their masculinity or using these exterior signs to try to show off. So maybe they go to the gym and they bulk up some muscle, they smoke cigars, and they talk about women in a callous way, and they puff out their chests when they talk, and they swear, and I mean, what I'm describing, you can find people like this all over the internet. If you have to call yourself an alpha male, if you have to call yourself, I'm a man, I'm masculine, then actually you have a deeply rooted insecurity. The most masculine men I know are dads who are just comfortable. They can operate on little sleep, but they're strong. They're there for their kids. They're there for their wives. They get their work done. And but I love like the dads that I'll roll with like at jiu-jitsu. And these are guys in like their 40s and 50s. And they're not going around like, oh, I'm this man. Like, I love some of the dads that I roll with. They're black belts, and they look like average middle-aged dudes. It's so funny. I feel like when you boxing gives you kind of a ripped physique. Jiu-jitsu, it doesn't necessarily rip you, but it gives you like crazy kinds of strength and hidden agility. So I know dads that I work with, that they look like just regular guys, and would be like, oh, look at that beta male. Oh, he is not a beta male. He could choke you out in about 10 seconds if he wanted to. But you wouldn't see that immediately because he's not posturing all the time. He's invested in himself physically, spiritually, financially, and emotionally. He's a good dad, good husband, and he's actually a really tough man, but he doesn't have to go around bragging about it. When you're weak and insecure, you project this tough guy image. But when you actually become tough and you've invested in yourself and you have discipline in all the areas of your life, there is a sense of toughness there that people can see that you don't have to project to other people.
Man, I could not agree more. And I can't tell you how many times I've done that in my life, especially when I was in my younger years. It's sort of gotten less and less as I've gotten older, and particularly about 8 years ago when I started boxing, it got much less. Used to like love getting in fights and joining gangs and all of this sort of stuff. And yeah, once you sort of get a little bit more security about yourself, then
you don't have to. You just walk around, and even if there is an opportunity to fight someone, you think to yourself, I could probably take I could take that guy. I don't feel the need to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't have to do that. You have that. Whereas I think you're right. A lot of guys who are craving masculinity and affirmation, that's one thing they'll do. They'll get in fights with people to try to prove how tough they are, which maybe that'll work against someone who's a lot weaker than you, but you could misjudge the situation and it could be really bad.
Last question I've got for you, Trent, just a little bit of a selfish one while I've got you.
That's fine.
There's a lot of guys out there, I feel, who are sort of in the same boat as me. I get tons of messages from guys who will say, oh man, I'm so glad you said that. I was feeling that exact same way about the current dating market and about what it's like to be a young man these days and all of the different fears and anxieties that we have. 28 years old, just turned 28. I've got no girlfriend, no partner, nothing like that, but I would love to be a dad one day. I would love to get married one day. how do I find myself a nice woman, and what would be your advice being a man who's married yourself?
Yeah, it's hard. So I've been married for a little over 10 years now. I have 3 kids. I got married actually when I was 28. My wife and I, we started dating when I was 25. Um, and I would say it's interesting when I go back and think about like my dating sphere and what it took. It's so funny. Laura really took a risk on me. I didn't have that great of a job or profession, but and I remember I asked her, I said, why did you marry me? I was barely making anything. But she said, I knew, yeah, you didn't make a lot of money at the beginning. I mean, I'm not making a lot now or anything, but I can provide for a family now. Uh, she said, I knew you were a hard worker.
Hmm.
She said, I could tell, like, you would do your job at the church and then you went home at night and you tried to create an apologetics program to do on your own. And you just did that at night instead of quitting your job and just doing that and not making any money. I knew you were a hard worker, even though you weren't maybe like didn't have the best job like right at that. So my advice though to young men who want to get married is it's running on what I've already said is you want to invest in yourself first. If you're thinking like, oh, women, they don't give me a chance, they're not giving me a chance. I would say, look, what do you have to offer them? Sometimes men get this entitled attitude, like we'll watch movies where like the geeky guy gets the hot girl, and it's like, well, maybe she wants a guy who has a, but he has a good personality. Like you know, she should give him a chance. If she doesn't, she's really shallow. Okay, well, the geeky guy wants the girl who's good looking and has a good personality. Why can't the good looking girl there are guys who are good looking and have a good personality. Why can't she choose that? If he wants someone who has that, why can't she? So like I would say is, what do you have to offer? What do you have to offer? Take a deep stock of self inventory. And I think honestly, the biggest thing would be, do you have do you have a stable career that would allow you to support a family? It doesn't have to be something amazing, but it's something that's stable. You've invested in yourself. You're like, okay, I can, like, if, we can have children. I'm not concerned about that. Yeah, I'm not saying you have to be wealthy, but you've got something and you might have to live humbly. You can say, yeah, I've got something that's stable. I can provide not just for you, I can provide for a family. I can be a provider. And there's stability there in that. So I would say it's one, invest. So you might need to invest vocationally. You might have a passion project, like, oh, I really love doing this. That's great. Is it paying anything? If not, you're going to have to make that a hobby until it grows to become a profession. But you have to find something else in the meantime so you can provide. So career stability there, stability spiritually. So you're a provider, not just financially. You're a provider spiritually. How is your prayer life? How are you when it comes to going to mass, going to confession? Make sure you are well rounded to provide for a family spiritually, financially, emotionally. Like, are you emotionally regulated? Do you often have outbursts? Do you have tantrums? Are you chronically late or tardy? Do you flake out on people? You got to nip that in the bud, because women will see that and say, like, you're not dependable, you're not reliable. Um, Here's the other one. You got to ditch porn. You got to get rid of it. You've got to find someone, maybe get Covenant Eyes software and have someone who's a friend of yours who can see what websites you go to. Because if you're looking at porn, here's what's going to happen. When you interact with women, if you have spent hours and hours and hours online watching naked women, watching sex acts, you will develop this gaze, an unconscious kind of stare, and you will have a hard time turning that off. So then when you're trying to interact with a real woman, you're going to subconsciously slide into that creepy kind of stare that you had and look and way of engaging someone that you had when you looked at women as objects in porn. So women can tell if you kind of have a creepy vibe to you in that respect, and you're always going to be seeing them as objects, and you're going to see dating as just, okay, do I do, like, I do 1, 2, and 3. I say this, I say that, I neg her, I do this. I remember the pickup artists back in the day. If I play this game just right, I can get her to do this when we come back to my apartment. That's not how you take the path towards marriage. The path is, find a woman who shares who's solid, who shares your values. So invest in yourself, one. And then if you're going to find someone who shares the values you share. Like I married Laura, we were both doing pro-life work together. We both went to college campuses, and Laura would debate people. And I was impressed by that she was willing to put herself out there to do that. So something that you deeply value, find someone who put yourself in an environment where there's going to be women who also value that, and you can strike up a friendship. And then you got to go for it. You got to ask people out. But it is hard, because I think a lot of women will say, I just wish guys would ask me out. And I'll call them on it and say, okay, yeah, but if a guy you thought you didn't like asked you out, you would feel awkward, or you say he's creepy or creeper. So I feel like sometimes women are inconsistent there. They'll be like, well, I wish guys asked me out. Yeah, but then if you wish guys that you liked asked you out. And then if they I think guys are nervous to do that because they don't want to come off creepy. Here, I think what's helpful is to I take a graded approach. If there's a girl that you vibe with, and like, hey, she's really cool, I like her, then you need to have some casual one-on-one time to get to know each other and see if you click one-on-one. Group settings are good. Casual one-on-one time, I would just start with coffee or lunch, something that's about 45 minutes. Coffee is a good one. I hate coffee, but something where it's 45 minutes, casual, you have to pay. But pick something that costs less than $20 total. It's casual. You have to pay, though, because you asked out. And just say, hey, you don't have to use the word date. You can just say, you want to grab coffee, you want to grab juice, you want to, go get a snack or something like that, or, whatever. Nothing fancy. Maybe do one or two of those. And if you're feeling a good vibe, like, hey, I really enjoyed that, then say, hey, can I take you out on a date on Saturday night? I take you out, you pay, you pick her up, you plan it, and you plan things where you put thought into it, and there's opportunities to have fun and to get to know each other. I think movies are lame because you're not talking, you're just watching something. No Netflix and chill. But I mean, I used to do things like I took a girl out once on a date to an old remote control race car track. It had dirt hills and other stuff. And I brought 2 remote control cars, and we just raced. We just did that. You can go, to an art gallery. What do you think of this? One time I took Laura out. We went to get coffee, and it was at a bookstore, and we each got 3 books. I said, hey, grab 3 books. If you could buy them now, just 3 books you would buy if you could. And we talked about what books we would get. And then if it's just going really well, then, I'm not going to walk people through the whole dating process, but I think you start casual. Then you can say, hey, can I take you out on a date? And then if it's going well, physical intimacy will increase slowly. Don't rush into physical intimacy. If you wouldn't do it in front of grandma, don't do it with her. Physical intimacy is the quickest way to torpedo yourself if you're getting hot and heavy, because what happens is then your brains both go cuckoo and you get infatuated with each other, and you don't have a clear head to see if this person is really right for you. So what I would say is you as a guy have to take that risk. If she says no, hey, all right.
I'm going to try that next time, Trent. I'm actually literally going to try that, because I'm somebody who probably rushes a little bit too quickly into the physical intimacy. I'm going to try and do that where I just wait like a few weeks or a month or whatever it is, and just see how it's different.
Well, here's what I would recommend. I mean, kissing, I understand. Don't let that get too out of hand. When you date someone, the infatuation period lasts for about 3 months. After about 3 months, then you get settled into a groove. The other thing I would say is if you're a guy and you're dating someone and you're not feeling it, don't drag it on longer than a year. A lot of times people will just get in a groove and they date for like 10 years. But then if you do that, you've lost the opportunity to meet people. She's lost the opportunity to meet people. If you don't know if you want to marry her after a year, unless there's exigent circumstances, you really don't.
Trent? Yeah, I've done a lot of listening to like red pill content, and I find some of it valuable. I find some of it just sort of gold tooth car salesman sort of stuff. But I think that there's this crossover that I wish was a little bit more apparent. I think it's happened on the Whatever podcast a few times, where they've gotten the Christians on to sort of preach the
Yes.
message, and there's that sort of worlds colliding happening. But I actually made a video a little while back with like a sort of a criticism of Matt Fradd from Pints with Aquinas,
Heinz.
who was having a go at the Whatever podcast. And my point essentially was that I think that these two worlds could come together because lying underneath that, there's a giant yearning of young men for purpose, and there's a yearning for young to be guided and steered, and they're looking in all the wrong places. And I think that there's almost this graduation that's happening. It's kind of happened to me in a way where I've listened to those guys and then sort of gotten a little bit bored of it, and then graduated to listening to guys like yourself and guys who are actually dads, guys who actually have families. It makes logical sense after a while. So do you think that there's a little bit of like a marriage going on there, or potential marriage?
Well, funny choice of words. Yeah, I do think that because there's a desire for virtue. So virtue is a habitual disposition to do good. So virtue, once again, dude, it's so fun talking to you to have the martial arts analogy. Like when you get good at boxing, you stop thinking about what you have to do. That when somebody throws a right hook at you, instantly just to do that. Or if somebody throws a kick at you, not to drop your arm like this to block it because you're going to get smacked in the head. Yeah. To just, pivot down. It becomes a natural disposition. Same with virtue, that when you become more virtuous, you don't have to think about doing the right thing. You just naturally do the right thing. It's become a habit for you. So I think that for men to meet a virtuous young woman, you have to be virtuous yourself. Because in the girl's shoes, you have to put yourself in the girl's shoes, by the way, especially for delaying physical intimacy. The girl is in a tough spot because she wants a guy who is virtuous. She wants a guy who's not just going to use her and leave. But it's very hard for her. So women have to develop BS detectors because it's hard. There's guys that can come off like really nice, virtuous guys, and they're actually creeps inside. So she's in sort of a tough spot. She's like, okay, I'm going to be dating guys. How do I figure out who's a creep and who's not when the creeps can act like good guys? And the easy way there is if you delay physical intimacy. I'm not saying you can never hold hands, but you know what I'm saying, hot and heavy. When that is delayed, it shows her, and you still show affection. You still show affection and care throughout a variety of love languages. It shows her, oh, this guy really does care, and he's not trying to just manipulate the situation. Oh, I was going to say, by the way, in respecting her. So another respect, she says no, or here's something that happens a lot. A girl's not into a guy, but she doesn't want to say no, so she's always busy. Like, oh, I'm busy, maybe some other time. 3 strikes, you're out. If she says she's busy 3 times in a row and never reschedules, let her go. She's not into you. Let her go.
Yeah,
Move
dude.
on.
Yeah, man.
But and so it's just, but not take it personally. Don't be mean to her. If she's not into you, it doesn't mean that you're bad or you're less of a man. You could just not be her type. You could be, some other woman would be like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. People have different types. So I think that you invest in yourself, become virtuous. If you want a virtuous woman, like attracts like. And then, but the guy has to take the risk. Ask around. So many women. It's so funny to me. When I was dating, before I met Laura, I was 25 and she was 19 when we started dating. So like I dated a fair amount through college. And I remember the girls that I went out with, some of them said to me, you're the first guy who ever took me out on a date. Like a lot of other guys, just let's hang out at my apartment. But like to put thought into it, where you do something fun, you get to know each other. It doesn't have to be also like an experience of we're going to go bungee jumping or we're going to do this or that. But these are opportunities where you spend time together to see, is this someone who's wife material? So seeing her, how does she act around her family? How she treats her dad is how she's going to treat you. How she, talks about her friends when they're not there. That'll reveal more things there. So, and same for you. It's ideal for her to see, how do you treat your family? How do you treat friends? How do you treat strangers? Are you polite in public? Are you a gentleman? And it's just about then, you see, do we match on everything? Do we also have our little side interests? Like you might like somebody who is, meets your core interests and also does the Muay Thai. It's not a deal breaker, but hey, if you can find someone, that's a fun thing to do there.
The one thing I'd say is that a lot of guys would hear this, and I get what you're saying, because I've started to actively try and live a little bit more that sort of lifestyle because I see the
Yeah.
fruits of it. But
Yeah.
my whole basically 20s and before that has just been a synthesis of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of just untangling to do. And I think there's a
Totally.
lot of guys who are in that situation as well. And, you know, I admit it because I'm pretty open about these sorts of things. But
Yeah.
there's a real untangling process that has to happen. Somebody might look at that and be like, "Oh yeah, like easy for you to say, Trent, because you know you've had this sort of linear path of being a Christian, and these are the
And
values."
what I would say here is that actually my path is very windy. So like I'm a convert. My family's not very religious. I didn't have a lot of guidance about what it means to be a man. So I remember in my early dating phase, there was a girl that I was, you know, we were like clicked. We were like, you know, she's very attractive. We had a lot in common. It was scary. People noticed how much we had in common. People would joke about it, but it was an unhealthy relationship, unhealthy friendship slash. Are we more than we are more than friends? It
Mm,
was an unhealthy emotional relationship, and by the time it ended, you know, and you know, I felt kind of used. I felt like bad. I felt like my heart had been ripped out, and so I felt after that, I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna date. I'm gonna date girls, and I'm going to have fun girlfriends. I'm not going to put my heart out there. I'm not going to get crushed again. And I'll get good at dating people, you know, how to like. So I called that period in my life being jerk Trent, you know.
mm,
I remember once I was dating a girl and she knew I was dating somebody, I was going out with somebody else. And she said, "Oh, why are you going out with so and so?" And I said, "Well, I told you that I told you that I date more than one person at a time. I've never hid that." And she said, "Yeah, but I still don't like it because I thought that like you would pick me, hopefully in the end." And I just like my heart sank because I felt like I'm using these people. And this
mm,
girl knew it, and she let me use her for the hopes that I'd eventually just like pick her. And I realized I'm like, no, just because I got hurt doesn't mean that I'm just going to be callous and just hurt other people. That's what a child does. You hurt me, I'm going to hurt other people. Instead, I'm going to have a different sense of I'm going to date with a purpose of finding a spouse to marry and seeing if this person is right for me, and not just try to win a dating game or be, you know, an alpha male at that, but have a sense of purpose and vocation in this. So I did have to learn these lessons the hard way. But if you're choosing the path of entertaining yourself, like I'm great at video games, I'm great at picking up women, I'm great at, you know, doing this or that, eventually it's going to be empty because you're just entertaining yourself. You're not investing in becoming an authentic man.
yeah, and I found that one thing that's really helped me with that is not having to be as accountable purely with myself since I've started to like look into faith more, and since I've started to move towards, you know, really trying to understand all the arguments of apologetics. I'm such an
Yeah.
amateur, but the idea of the fear of God, the seeds planted in me, and
Yeah.
I have that fear every time I go to do something that's immoral. But Trent, I've
And not
held
just
you
that,
way
but
too long.
yeah, but oh, you're fine. But drawing close to God, that's the thing also that's helped me, is to say, look, I was counting on myself to make myself feel good in all these different situations, when understanding I should rely on God, and I won't always
Mm,
feel good necessarily. But I can say, hey, if things aren't going well, God gave me a cross to bear. He gave me some suffering, and this was something for my good and something I can bear for the good of others, as well. And that's what, and so I think that when you draw closer to God in that respect, yeah, you've got your authentic masculinity. But as you were saying, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed
man, I
this.
really appreciate you going overtime because I think I've probably gone double what I said I'd keep you for. But
Oh, we're all good. We're all good.
if you don't mind, yeah, letting everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel, the Council of Trent, COUNSCL. You can check that out there. I do episodes Monday, Wednesday, apologetics episodes, the podcast, audio podcasts. I do Free for All Friday, just kind of random content as well. And my website is trenthorn.com, and you can find my books or where Catholic books are sold. But yeah, I would definitely check out my YouTube channel, the Council of Trent.
It'll all be linked below. Trent, thank you very much.
Thank you.